We have now a couple of real crowd pleasers in the two songs we're going to do. The first of which is Elijah Rock. When I first did this song, many teachers wrote me letters from all over the country saying, Mr. Hairston, you have a very nice song here. The young people like to sing it, audiences like it, but what does it mean, Elijah Rock? And I didn't know what to write to them because it had never occurred to me to go into the song that deeply as to what it meant, because I had been educated in Caucasian schools in New England, my music education, but I was still African enough to appreciate rhythm. To the African, I think I told you that, to the African, music was rhythm. And when I did this song, the rhythm was so important. The beginning of jazz, this, as you will hear when we start singing this song, it's the basis of our modern jazz. And so the rhythm was what I was getting my satisfaction out of. But then anyway, I had to write to the teachers to let them know something about the song. So one night I was coming home from rehearsal, and I brought the subject up to some of the singers I was bringing home, and one of the girls said, well, now the whole story is in the 1 Kings 19th chapter, I think. Ahab was the king of the Jewish people at that particular time. I went home and read it. His wife was Jezebel. And so Ahab had put to death quite a number of false prophets, the idol prophets the Jewish people were worshiping at that time. Ahab tried to get the Jewish people to come back to God. And when they got out of Egypt, you know, they began to worship idol gods. So Ahab is trying to get them to come back, and they wouldn't. And so there was a contest. What you do is read it if you want to get more of it. Read the 19th chapter of 1 Kings, and you get the whole story. I don't have time. But anyway, Jezebel sent a message to Elijah saying that she is going to take his life. And the next day, so Elijah goes out of town. And when he got out into the countryside, he sat down and went to sleep. The angel said, where are you going? He says, I'm fleeing for my life. They're trying to take my life away. The angel said, you go up to Mount Horeb, and you stay there until we tell you to come back. So he says, yes. And he went up and stayed among the rocks, stayed in the cave, and the earthquakes came. The rocks were torn asunder, the winds blew, and the rains came, and he was not harmed, you see. And so at the end of the 40 days, the Bible story says, a still small voice was heard. And so then he got a message from God to go down and to anoint a new king. And so I imagine the slave who heard this story, imagine this slave was probably taking his master to church, to the white church, and then some of the churches permitted them to stay up in the balcony and listen to the service. Others didn't permit them in at all. They had to stand at the window. So anyway, he heard the minister speaking on this subject of Elijah. And so he was fascinated about Elijah going up here and staying 40 days and 40 nights among the rocks up in this hill and was not harmed with all this catastrophe happening, you know. And so when church is over, he takes his master home and puts up the horses and goes down among the slave quarters and gets his contemporaries around him. And he says, I heard a wonderful, wonderful story at the white church today. And they say, well, what was it? So now he is trying to he's going to tell them this story, but he has to get into the rhythm, you see, that he wants to establish. So when he gets into his rhythm and everybody's there, just as I told you about the little boy who tells the story, and well, he's getting into his rhythm. And by the time he gets into his established rhythm, he has forgotten all the details of what the minister had said at the church, the white churches. So all he could remember was Elijah and the rock. So we sing Elijah Rock. And then you'll hear this jazz tempo as we go through here. And out of this old spiritual, many spirituals of such sort, comes our modern jazz.
Elijah Rock, shout, shout, Elijah Rock coming up low. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up low. Elijah, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up low. Elijah, Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord.
Everybody.
Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Sings the lyre and conjure too. If you don't find out, he'll conjure you. If I could, I surely would. Just stand on the rock where Moses stood. Rock Elijah Rock. Shout, shout. Elijah, Elijah, Elijah Rock. We're gonna shout, shout. Elijah Rock. Elijah Rock coming up. Elijah Rock coming up. Elijah Rock coming up. Shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up. Lord. Elijah Rock. Shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah, 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 shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout. Elijah Rock coming up, Lord.
The next song we're doing is God's Gonna Build Up Zion's Wall. Here's a nice little song. This is a gay little song. This one tells about the freedom of the slaves. In 1862, in the summer, I think it was August, so the summer of 1862, Abraham Lincoln got his advisors around him, and he came up with the Emancipation Proclamation. It didn't take effect until January 1st, 1863, but he had formed it in 1862. So he did it more as a war measure. He said to the states that were still at war, the southern states, Confederate states, he said, now, if you are still at war with us on January 1st, 1863, then I am going to sign this proclamation, and it will go into effect and set approximately 4 million black slaves free in the South. That's how many slaves there were in the South. So now he did this as a war measure. I imagine not so much his love for the black man as a human being, as a black, although he did a lot for us, but he did it to break the back of the South, because legally I don't know anything about law, but here we're practically two countries fighting against each other, you see, and I don't see how he could say to them down there, if you don't free your slaves, I mean, if you don't quit the war and come back over here, and by 1863, I'm going to set all the people over on your side free, you see. But he did, and the blacks were freed. Some of the people decided to stay at home. The man, I imagine the master went out that day on some of the plantations. You see, at that time, the only able-bodied white men left on the plantations were old men and the women and the children, the whites and the slaves. All the able-bodied white men at that time, by 1863, were at war, trying to protect the South, you see. And so I imagine the older white woman or white man who was left, the old people, called the slaves together that morning and says, well, now, Abraham Lincoln has said that you can go free. But You can go if you want to. We can't keep you as slaves any longer. But if you want to stay and help us build a plantation, because it had been devastated, many of the plantations by the Yankees you see coming through, this is where you are welcome to. So many of the slaves stayed on the plantation. They had nowhere to go. Others who were free, they had nowhere to go to either. But just the word freedom means that you can go if you feel like it. And they'd never been, some of them 500 yards, so say they wanted to go. And so I see them going down the road here now, just singing, a great day, the marchers marching, just singing and skipping along the road, going God knows where, but leaving this place, you see. And so that's what we sing. Great day, the righteous marching, God's going to build up Zion's wall.
Great day, great day, great day, great day, great day, great day, great day.
Before we finish this session, I'd like to thank Mr. Leon Leonard Sr. for all of the wonderful artwork that we have done, he has done here. It was so appropriate to all of the songs that we have sung. Just wonderful. I like those hands. I like everything. And those two wonderful black ladies who meant so much to us in the early days.